The blade stopped 3 inches from Commander Vex's throat. The Krillian instructor didn't flinch, his 4 eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the death toll.
47 cadets. Gone.
Erased from existence in the simulation of Earth's Pacific Northwest. Lieutenant Kara Chen sat perfectly still in the front row of the amphitheater, her human features hidden beneath the standard-issue neural mask every officer wore during classified briefings. The device projected a generic humanoid face, obscuring species identification. She'd worn it for 6 months at the Galactic Military Academy, without anyone questioning her presence. Commander Vex's scales rippled with barely contained fury. The simulation chamber behind him still smoldered, the holographic trees of Earth's forests flickering in and out of existence. 47 of the Academy's finest warriors, representing 12 different species, had entered that training ground. None had made it past 72 hours.
Earth remains quarantined for good reason, Vex announced, his voice carrying across 500 seated cadets. The planet designation Terra is classified as a Class Omega death world. Gravity 0.98 times standard, crushes bone structures not evolved for such pressure. The atmosphere contains 21% oxygen, a concentration that would ignite the blood of half the species in this room. Kara's jaw tightened. She breathed that so-called toxic air every day of her childhood.
But the environment is merely the beginning, Vex continued, manipulating the holographic display. Images of Earth's wildlife materialized above the crowd.
A grizzly bear, a saltwater crocodile, a box jellyfish. The fauna evolved in constant warfare. Apex predators layer upon apex predators, venoms that dissolve organic matter in seconds. Bacteria that consume flesh while the host still lives. A Valorian cadet in the 3rd row raised a tentacle. Sir, the simulation parameters must have been flawed. Surely trained warriors could adapt to such conditions.
Vex's mandibles clicked in what might have been a laugh. Cadet, those 47 soldiers weren't defeated by Earth's animals. They were killed by the planet itself. Atmospheric rivers that flood entire regions in hours. Seismic activity that tears the ground apart without warning. Temperature fluctuations of 40 degrees in a single rotation. They died from dehydration, hypothermia, and one unfortunate soul was struck by a bolt of atmospheric electricity while standing under a tree. The amphitheater filled with nervous whispers. Kara had been struck by lightning once as a teenager. She'd spent 3 days in the hospital and walked away with nothing but a scar on her shoulder. The indigenous species that evolved on Terra, Vex said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, developed in an environment that actively tried to exterminate them at every moment. They learned to persist not through strength or natural armor, but through sheer stubborn refusal to die. The Galactic Council made the correct decision 2 centuries ago. If a species requires such brutality to survive, they have no place among civilized worlds.
Kara's hands gripped the armrests of her chair. 2 centuries.
The quarantine had lasted 200 years, and humanity still didn't know why the galaxy had abandoned them.
The simulation will run again next quarter, Vex announced.
Any cadet who believes they can survive 72 hours on Terra may volunteer. To date, across 15 Academy cycles, 412 cadets have attempted the challenge.
The survival rate remains 0%.
The commander's eyes swept across the assembled students. For just a moment his gaze lingered on Kara's masked face. She didn't move, didn't breathe, her training holding her perfectly still.
Class dismissed. Remember what you've learned today. Earth is not a place for the living.
It is a graveyard that happens to have an atmosphere. As the cadets filed out, discussing the gruesome details of the simulation deaths, Kara remained seated. Her mind raced through the implications.
412 attempts!
0 survivors. The galaxy's best warriors couldn't last 3 days in the forests where she'd spent her summers camping with her father. She stood slowly, adjusting her uniform. The neuromask concealed her smile, but nothing could hide the determination in her eyes.
Next quarter, there would be a volunteer for the Earth simulation. And for the first time in Academy history, someone would walk out of that chamber alive.
The galaxy thought Earth was hell. Kara was about to show them what humanity called home.
Commander Vex stood in the Simulation Control Center, reviewing the volunteer roster for the Earth Challenge. One name appeared on the list, submitted in the final hour before the deadline.
Lieutenant Kara Chen. The file showed an unremarkable service record, adequate combat scores, and a species designation that made his blood run cold. Human. This has to be an error, muttered Lieutenant Zane, the thoraxian technician manning the control boards. His exoskeleton clicked as he pulled up the genetic scan from her academy entrance exam. The systems flagged nothing.
How did a human get past screening?
Vex's mandibles ground together, the neural masks.
Of course.
The privacy devices designed to protect cadets from species bias had inadvertently allowed Earth's quarantined species to infiltrate the academy. He should report this immediately. Shut down the simulation. Contact the Council. Instead, he pulled up the historical records of the Earth Challenge.
412 failures, 15 years of data.
Every species in the known galaxy had sent their finest warriors into that simulation.
Krillians with armored hides thick enough to stop plasma rounds. The Lorians who could regenerate lost limbs. The Raxians who could survive in vacuum for hours. All of them had died on Earth.
Sir? Zane's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Should I delete her from the roster? Vex stared at the human's file.
2 centuries of quarantine based on fear and assumption. 2 centuries of calling Earth a death world while never asking the species that actually lived there.
The galaxy had made first contact with humanity, taken one look at their planet's hostility, and sealed them away like a biological hazard. What if they'd been wrong? No, Vex said finally. Let the simulation proceed.
But I want every sensor active. Full medical team on standby.
And Zane, not a word of this to anyone until it's over. The amphitheater filled quickly the next morning. Word had spread that someone had volunteered for the Earth Challenge. The cadets packed the rows, eager to watch another failure, another confirmation that their galaxy was safer with Terra sealed away. Kara stood in the staging area, stripped of her neural mass by protocol. Her human features were visible now, though she doubted anyone in the crowd recognized the significance. She'd kept to herself, avoided attention, and the Academy's species database was intentionally vague to prevent discrimination. The simulation chamber stretched before her, a perfect recreation of Earth's Olympic Peninsula.
Temperate rainforest. Moss-covered trees reaching 60 meters high.
The sound of rainfall already echoing through the space. The holographic system could recreate every environmental factor, from the moisture in the air to the microscopic fungi in the soil.
Lieutenant Chen, Vex's voice crackled through the chamber speakers. You have 72 hours to survive.
You will be provided with standard Academy survival gear, water filtration device,
emergency rations, basic medical supplies. No weapons.
No communication equipment. The simulation will not pause for injury or distress.
Do you understand the terms?
Yes, sir. Kara's voice was steady. Then begin. The chamber doors sealed. Rain intensified, cold Pacific Northwest rain that soaked through her uniform in seconds. The temperature reading on her wrist display showed 42 degrees.
Not cold enough to kill, but cold enough to sap heat from an unprotected body in hours.
Kara moved immediately. No hesitation. She'd learned at age 7 that standing still in the rain was a good way to get hypothermia. She needed shelter, needed fire, needed to get her core temperature stable before the real challenges began. The crowd in the amphitheater watched in silence as she identified a suitable location, a slight overhang in the terrain that would provide minimal protection from the rain. She gathered deadfall, sorted the wood by dryness, constructed a basic lean-to using branches and moss. She's going to die of exposure, someone in the crowd muttered.
Look at her, she's already shivering.
But Kara was moving with purpose, not panic. She stripped bark from a cedar tree, layered it for insulation, used the emergency fire starter from her kit to ignite the driest wood she'd found. Within 30 minutes, smoke rose from her shelter. Impossible,
breathed the Valorian cadet. The moisture content in the air should make fire starting nearly impossible. She chose cedar bark, noted another observer. It's naturally water-resistant, and she's burning the inner wood, not the wet outer layers. Vex watched from the control center, his 4 eyes tracking every movement. The human wasn't stronger than the other cadets who'd attempted this simulation. She wasn't faster. Her reflexes were actually below average compared to most species represented at the academy. But she moved like someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Hour 6. Kara had dried her clothing by the fire and consumed half an emergency ration. She'd collected rainwater in her filtration container and identified 3 different edible plant species within 20 meters of her shelter. The moss she'd used for insulation was now serving as additional bedding. She's treating this like a camping trip, Zane observed from his station. Not a survival challenge! Because for her species, Vex said slowly, this is recreational. Hour 12. The rain hadn't stopped. Kara had reinforced her shelter and built a second fire for redundancy. She'd located a small creek, checked it for parasites using the water filtration device's scanner, and filled her reserves. The crowd in the amphitheater had thinned slightly, but over 200 cadets remained, watching with growing unease. A Krillian warrior in the 5th row stood abruptly. This is rigged! She has to have received extra training! No one adapts to Earth's environment this quickly, but the simulation sensors showed no tampering. Every environmental factor was accurate. The temperature had dropped to 38 degrees as simulated night fell. The rain had increased. Wind speeds had picked up, howling through the holographic trees. Kara added more wood to her fire and settled into her shelter wrapped in her dried uniform and insulated with moss. She looked uncomfortable, but not distressed. Not dying. Hour 24. First full day complete. The statistics from previous attempts showed that 60% of casualties occurred in the first 24 hours. Exposure. Dehydration. Injury from unfamiliar terrain. Kara Chen had not only survived but had established a functional base camp. She's making it look easy, Zane said, disbelief evident in his clicking mandibles. Vex pulled up historical weather data for the Olympic Peninsula. We're only 12 hours from the real test. There's a storm coming. Hour 30. The storm hit with the force of orbital bombardment. Wind speeds exceeded 80 kilometers per hour. Rain fell in sheets so thick the visibility dropped to less than 5 meters. Trees bent and swayed, ancient giants groaning under the onslaught. The crowd in the amphitheater leaned forward. This was where cadets died. This was Earth showing its true face. Kara's shelter held. She'd built it low to the ground, angled against the prevailing wind direction. The fire guttered but didn't die, protected by a windbreak of stacked stones she'd constructed during the calmer morning hours. She'd secured her supplies in a watertight bag fashioned from her emergency blanket. She anticipated the storm, someone whispered. Another cadet pulled up meteorological data on their personal display. The pattern was there, dropping pressure. Increasing wind speeds, she read the weather. Without instruments, Zane added, she's reading weather patterns by observation alone. The storm raged for 6 hours. Kara remained in her shelter, occasionally adding wood to the fire, checking her water supply, staying dry and alive while the forest transformed into chaos around her. Lightning split the sky. Thunder shook the ground. A tree fell 30 meters from her position, crashing through the canopy with the sound of artillery fire. She didn't panic, didn't abandon her shelter. She'd secured her location based on terrain analysis, away from obvious fall zones protected by the surrounding geography. When the storm finally broke, 42 hours had elapsed. Kara emerged from her shelter, assessed the damage to her camp, and began repairs. The routine was familiar. The galaxy watched something impossible unfold before them. A human, on Earth, treating a Class Omega death world like an inconvenience. Commander Vex sat in stunned silence as Hour 48 arrived. No cadet had survived beyond 47 hours. Kara Chen was now in uncharted territory, and she looked better than most cadets did after a standard survival exercise on regulated training worlds. Sir? Zane's voice was quiet. The Academy Board is requesting an explanation. They've been monitoring the simulation. They know she's human. Tell them the simulation is running under standard protocols. No interference. No modifications. Vex kept his eyes on the display. Tell them we're collecting data on a previously untested variable. Hour 50. Kara had moved from her shelter to explore the surrounding area. She identified multiple water sources, cataloged edible plants, and marked potential hazards on her mental map. She moved through the forest with a casual confidence that made veteran soldiers in the audience shift uncomfortably. A young Thoraxian cadet stood abruptly and left the amphitheater. Others followed. They'd come to watch a human fail, to confirm their beliefs about Earth's hostility. Instead, they were watching their fundamental understanding of death worlds crumble. She's not struggling, observed a Valorian instructor who joined Vex in the control center. Every other cadet we've sent in there was fighting for every breath. She's thriving! Vex pulled up comparative data. Heart rate, stress hormones, energy expenditure. Kara's readings were lower than cadets performing routine exercises in the academy gym. Her body wasn't treating this as a crisis. This was her baseline. Earth didn't make humans stronger, Vex said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. It made them consider this normal. Hour 60. Kara had caught fish from the creek using an improvised trap made from branches. She'd cooked them over her fire, supplementing the emergency rations she'd been conserving. The simulation included Earth's actual fauna, and she'd identified which species were safe to eat, which to avoid, which presented danger. A bear had passed within 50 meters of her camp during hour 56. Kara had secured her food, moved to high ground, and waited for the creature to continue on its way. She didn't try to fight it. Didn't run in panic. She'd simply removed herself from the equation and let the apex predator go about its business. She understands the ecosystem, Zane observed. She's not trying to conquer it. She's coexisting with it. Hour 70. The atmosphere in the amphitheater had changed. What started as entertainment had become something closer to a religious experience. Cadets from a dozen different species sat in absolute silence, watching a human do what their galaxy considered impossible. Kara was resting in her shelter, fire burning steadily, supplies organized. She'd survived 2 nights, 1 major storm, multiple environmental hazards. She'd maintained her core temperature, stayed hydrated, avoided injury. She looked tired but healthy. The simulation countdown ticked toward hour 72. Vex stood in the control center, his 4 eyes fixed on the human who'd shattered every assumption his species had made about Earth. The quarantine, the classifications, the fear. All of it based on the belief that Terra was too hostile for civilized life. They'd never considered that a species might simply adapt to that hostility. Might find it normal, might call it home. Hour 72 arrived like the chime of a bell. The simulation chamber powered down, the holographic forest fading away. Kara Chen stood in the center of the staging area, alive and alert as the doors opened. Silence filled the amphitheater. 413 attempts! 1 survivor! And she'd made it look routine. Commander Vex walked into the chamber, approaching the human with slow, measured steps. His mandibles clicked once, twice. When he spoke, his voice carried through the chamber speakers to the assembled crowd. Lieutenant Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Military Academy, I must ask, why didn't you inform us you were human during the admission process? Kara met his 4-eyed gaze without flinching. The neuromasks are standard issue, sir. The Academy's charter prohibits species-based discrimination. I fulfilled all entrance requirements. I saw no reason to volunteer information that might bias my evaluation. You deceived us. I followed protocol, sir. Vex's scales rippled. She was right. The Academy had created the very systems that allowed her presence. They'd been so concerned with preventing bias against weaker species that they'd never considered someone from a restricted world might want to join. Your species has been quarantined for 2 centuries, Vex said. Earth is classified as Class Omega, unsuitable for galactic integration. Based on what evidence, sir? Kara's voice remained respectful but firm. Based on the fact that cadets from other species can't survive there? That's not evidence of our world's hostility. That's evidence of their inadequacy. The words landed like a physical blow. Hundreds of cadets shifted uncomfortably. She just called the galaxy's finest warriors inadequate. You survived because you're adapted to Earth's environment, Vex countered. That doesn't make you superior. It makes you specialized. Then why? Kara said quietly. Have I ranked in the top 15% of every combat simulation I've participated in? Why did I score second in the Academy-wide tactical examination last quarter? Why have I completed every training course at or above standard despite being adapted to a supposedly harder environment? Vex had no answer. He'd reviewed her full record during the simulation. She was right! Kara Chen wasn't succeeding because of Earth's gravity or atmosphere. She was succeeding because she was a competent soldier who happened to be human. The quarantine was designed to protect the galaxy, Vex said, but his voice lacked conviction. From what? Kara gestured to the now empty simulation chamber. From people who can survive in difficult conditions. From soldiers who don't quit when things get hard. Sir, with respect, I think the galaxy quarantined Earth because we scared you, not because we're dangerous. Because we survive things you can't comprehend. The amphitheater erupted. Cadets shouting, arguing, some defending the quarantine, others questioning everything they'd been taught. Vex raised a hand, demanding silence. This matter is above my authority, he announced. Lieutenant Chen, you are confined to quarters pending review by the Galactic Council. Your presence at this academy constitutes a violation of quarantine protocols. Understood, sir. Kara stood at attention, but her eyes held no fear. Though I would like to note that I've been here for 6 months. If humans were the threat you claim, you'd already know. Security personnel escorted her from the chamber. The cadets filed out in stunned silence. Commander Vex remained behind, staring at the simulation controls. Zane approached cautiously. Sir, the Council is demanding a full report. Tell them the truth, Vex said. Tell them a human survived 72 hours on Earth because to humans, that's just another day. The implications spread through the Academy like wildfire. If one human could integrate seamlessly into galactic society, if one human could outperform cadets from established species, what did that say about the 2-century-old quarantine? What did it say about Earth? In her quarters, Kara sat on the edge of her bunk, staring at the starfield visible through her window. Earth was out there somewhere, quarantined and isolated, billions of humans living their lives unaware that the galaxy existed and feared them. She'd spent 6 months proving humans could stand among the stars. Now she'd just proven they could survive what the galaxy called impossible. The question was whether the Council would see opportunity or threat. Her door chimed. Kara looked up, expecting security, perhaps additional questioning. Instead, Commander Vex stood in the corridor, alone and without his official insignia. May I enter, Lieutenant? It's your academy, sir. Vex stepped inside, the door sealing behind him. He studied her with his 4 eyes, mandibles clicking, and what she'd learned was his thinking pattern. I've been reviewing Earth's history, he said finally. The records from first contact. Did you know the initial survey team spent only 6 hours on your planet before recommending quarantine? 6 hours? Kara felt anger flash through her chest. They sealed away my entire species based on 6 hours of observation? They landed in the middle of a hurricane, Vex continued. On the coast of a landmass you call Australia. 3 team members were injured. 1 was bitten by what your records call a inland taipan. They concluded Earth was actively hostile to sentient life and recommended immediate departure. So they ran away and never came back. Kara's voice was flat. They made a decision based on limited information and fear, Vex said. And the galaxy has maintained that decision for 200 years because no one wanted to admit we might have been wrong. He moved to the window, looking out at the stars. Your performance in the simulation has created a problem, Lieutenant Chen. A significant problem, because now I have to report that everything we believed about Earth might be incorrect. And if you do that, the quarantine will be reviewed. First contact protocols will be reassessed, and billions of humans will suddenly have access to galactic society. Vex turned to face her. Are you prepared for what that means? For your species? Kara stood, moving to stand beside him at the window. My species has been isolated for 2 centuries. We've developed faster-than-light travel on our own. We've established colonies in our own solar system. We've survived and thrived on a planet the galaxy calls a death world. Sir, humans have been ready for this since the day you left us behind. The Council won't move quickly, Vex warned. There will be debates. Committees! Years of political maneuvering. Then I'll keep training, Kara said simply. I'll keep proving that humans belong here. And when the Council finally makes their decision, there will be no doubt about our capabilities. Vex's mandibles clicked again, this time in what might have been approval. You understand you've made yourself a symbol. Every decision you make, every success or failure, will be scrutinized as evidence for or against lifting the quarantine. I know. Kara met his alien gaze steadily. I've known since the day I left Earth. I'm not just a cadet. I'm an ambassador for a species the galaxy forgot. They didn't forget, Vex said quietly. They were afraid. And Lieutenant, after watching you survive what killed 412 of our best warriors, I'm beginning to understand why. He moved toward the door, then paused. The Council's decision will take time. Until then, you remain a cadet at this academy. Your current status stands. But Chen, if you're going to represent your species, I suggest you stop holding back in combat simulations. The galaxy needs to see what humans are actually capable of, not what they think we can handle. The door closed behind him, leaving Kara alone with the stars. She'd survived Earth. She'd survived the academy. Now came the hardest part, proving to an entire galaxy that humanity deserved a place among them. The question wasn't whether she could do it. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for the answer. The council chamber aboard the station designated as Galactic Prime Governance Center looked like something from a dream. Crystalline walls that shifted colors with the emotional states of the assembled representatives. Gravity fields that allowed delegates from radically different environments to coexist in the same space. 247 species, each with their own seat, their own voice. And in the center, standing alone on a raised platform, Kara Chen wore her academy uniform and waited for judgment. The proceedings had lasted 6 days. 6 days of testimony from Commander Vex, 6 days of reviewing her performance records. 6 days of the galaxy's leadership debating whether to acknowledge they'd made a catastrophic mistake 2 centuries ago. Ambassador Thelnax of the Krillian Dominion rose from his seat, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber floor. He was old, ancient even by his species' standards. He'd been alive during the first contact with Earth. Lieutenant Chen, his voice resonated through the translation matrix. This council has reviewed the evidence presented. Your survival in the Earth simulation, your academic performance, your integration into academy life without incident. He paused, scales rippling. You have proven that a human can function in galactic society. This was never in question. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. Kara remained silent, waiting. What remains in question, Thelnax continued, is whether humanity as a species is prepared for integration. You are one individual, an exceptional individual perhaps, but still one. How can we extrapolate from your performance to an entire world? With respect, Ambassador, Kara said, her voice steady despite 500 alien eyes focused on her. The question isn't whether humanity is prepared for integration. The question is whether the galaxy is prepared to admit it was wrong. The chamber erupted. delegates shouting in a dozen languages, the translation matrix struggling to keep pace. Ambassador Thelnax raised a hand demanding silence.
Explain yourself, Lieutenant. The first contact team spent 6 hours on Earth before recommending quarantine, Kara said. 6 hours. They landed in one of the most hostile regions on the planet during a natural disaster.
They made a decision based on fear and incomplete data. Then, rather than return to gather more information, the Council sealed away my entire species.
She took a breath, gathering her thoughts. I've spent 6 months at the Academy.
6 months living, training, and working alongside cadets from across the galaxy. I've competed in combat simulations. I've studied xenobiology and tactical theory. I've made friends with beings whose biology is so different from mine we couldn't even breathe the same air without protective equipment.
And in those 6 months, Kara continued, I've learned something important. Earth isn't a death world. Earth is a training ground. Every human alive has survived conditions that kill galactic soldiers.
We don't see it as exceptional because it's all we've ever known. But that resilience, that adaptability, that's what 200 years of quarantine has cost you.
Another delegate rose, a Valorian whose tentacles rippled with agitation. You speak as if the quarantine harmed us rather than protecting us.
It did both, Kara said. You've spent 2 centuries afraid of Earth.
Afraid of humans. Afraid to admit you might have overreacted.
And in that time, what has humanity been doing? We've been developing. Advancing. Learning. We've reached the stars on our own. We've established colonies. We've created technologies you don't have access to because we developed them in isolation.
She gestured to the assembled council.
You think you quarantined us? Ambassador, we've been quarantining ourselves from you.
And we've been doing just fine. The silence that followed was absolute.
Kara had just told the most powerful governing body in the known galaxy that humanity didn't need them. It was audacious.
It was reckless. It was also completely true.
Commander Vex stood in the observation gallery above the council chamber, watching the proceedings with Zane at his side. The Thoraxian technician's exoskeleton clicked nervously.
She's going to get herself exiled, Zane muttered. You don't tell the Galactic Council they're irrelevant.
She didn't say they're irrelevant, Vex corrected. She said humanity is self-sufficient.
There's a difference. The Council won't see it that way.
The Council, Vex said slowly, is terrified. Look at them. Zane focused on the delegate from the Thoraxian Collective, a member of his own species. The ambassador's posture showed clear signs of distress, chemical indicators leaking through his exoskeleton. Similar patterns appeared across multiple species. Fear. Uncertainty.
They're afraid she's right, Zane realized.
Worse,
Vex said. They're afraid of what happens if they lift the quarantine and billions of humans flood into galactic society. Humans who have survived on Earth. Humans who have developed technologies we don't understand. Humans who, according to Lieutenant Chen, don't actually need us. In the chamber below, Ambassador Thelnax was conferring with several other senior delegates. Finally, he turned back to Kara. Lieutenant Chen, this council acknowledges your points. However, the quarantine was established for the protection of all species, including humanity. Earth's environment is demonstrably hostile. Your own survival in the simulation proves this, as no other species can endure such conditions. That's not a reason to keep us isolated, Kara countered. That's a reason to recruit us. How many military operations fail because the environment is too hostile? How many colonies are abandoned because the conditions are too extreme? You've spent 2 centuries avoiding Earth when you should have been partnering with humanity. We survive what you can't. That's not a threat. That's an asset. A new voice entered the discussion.
Ambassador Lyra of the Valorian Expanse, her crystalline body refracting light across the chamber. And what of human aggression?
Your species' history is marked by conflict, warfare, violence on a scale rarely seen in civilized worlds.
Yes, Kara said simply. We fought, we competed. We struggled, That's what happens when you evolve on a planet that's actively trying to kill you. But we also learned cooperation. We learned that survival requires working together. Every major advancement in human history came from collaboration, not conquest. She paused, letting that sink in. You're afraid we're violent, but Ambassador, I've seen the galactic military records. You have wars, you have conflicts. The difference is that humans learned to fight on Earth, where losing meant extinction. We learned the cost of violence in blood and ash. We understand war in ways you can't, because our planet taught us that survival is worth more than victory. Pretty words, Ambassador Lyra said. But can you guarantee humanity will be peaceful if the quarantine is lifted? Can you guarantee the same for any species? Kara met the ambassador's gaze. The Krillian Dominion fought 3 civil wars before joining the galactic community. The Thoraxian Collective nearly destroyed themselves in a religious conflict. The Valorians engaged in a century-long territorial dispute with the Zarith Alliance. Every species in this chamber has blood in their history. She spread her hands. The only difference is that you got to prove yourselves. You got the chance to grow, to change, to become more than your worst moments. Humanity deserves the same opportunity. Commander Vex leaned forward in the observation gallery. She's not just defending humanity. She's putting the Council itself on trial. It's working, Zane observed. Look at the delegate responses. She's creating doubt. Below, Ambassador Thelnax conferred with his colleagues again. The discussion lasted several minutes, delegates arguing in hushed tones. Finally, the Krillian ambassador turned back to address the chamber. Lieutenant Chen, this council has made a decision. The quarantine of Earth will remain in effect. Kara felt her heart sink, but she kept her expression neutral. However, Thelnax continued, we acknowledge the merit of your arguments. A research expedition will be authorized to return to Earth. A proper study, not the 6-hour survey that led to the original quarantine. This expedition will assess humanity's current status, technological development, and readiness for potential integration. How long will this assessment take? Kara asked. Estimated timeline is 18 months. During this period, you will continue your training at the Academy. Your performance will serve as additional data for the Council's final decision. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the immediate lifting of the quarantine Kara had hoped for, but it was progress. After 2 centuries of isolation, the galaxy was finally willing to look at Earth again. Thank you, Ambassador, Kara said, executing a perfect military salute. Do not thank us yet, Lieutenant, Thelnax replied. The expedition may conclude that the quarantine should be made permanent. Your species' fate is far from decided. Understood, sir. The council session ended. Delegates filed out, many casting glances at the human who'd challenged their assumptions. Kara remained on the platform, processing what had just happened. Commander Vex appeared at her side, having descended from the observation gallery. 18 months, he said. That's a long time to carry the weight of your entire species on your shoulders. It's the same weight I've been carrying since I left Earth, Kara replied. The only difference is now the galaxy knows I'm carrying it. The expedition will be thorough, Vex warned. They'll visit multiple locations, interview humans from different cultures. They'll assess your military capabilities, your technology, your social structures. Everything will be examined. Good, Kara said. Let them see humanity as we actually are. Not the monsters they've imagined for 2 centuries. Vex's mandibles clicked. What if they don't like what they find? Then humanity continues on its own path, Kara said with a shrug. We've been doing fine without the galaxy. We'll keep doing fine if that's what it takes. She started walking toward the exit, then paused. Commander, can I ask you something? Of course. When you watched me in that simulation, when you saw me survive on Earth, what did you feel? Vex considered the question carefully. Fear, he admitted. Not of you specifically. Fear of what it means that you've found Earth normal. Fear that my species has been weak all along and simply didn't know it. You're not weak, Kara said gently. You're adapted to different environments.
There's no shame in that. A Valorian can regenerate from injuries that would kill me.
A Thoraxian can survive in conditions that would suffocate most species. Everyone has strengths.
But your strength, Vex said, is surviving what kills everyone else.
No, Kara corrected.
Our strength is that we keep going even when survival isn't guaranteed. That's what Earth taught us.
That's what the galaxy needs to understand, she resumed walking, leaving Vex alone in the empty council chamber. The Krillian commander stood in silence, contemplating the human's words. 18 months. 18 months to determine if humanity deserved a place among the stars. 18 months for Kara Chen to prove that Earth wasn't a death world.
It was a graveyard that happened to grow gardens. The expedition ship designated as the GSS Discovery entered Earth's orbit exactly 6 months after the Council's decision. Kara watched from the Academy's observation deck as the vessel began its survey protocols. She'd been given permission to monitor the expedition's progress, a courtesy extended after her council testimony.
Commander Vex stood beside her, reviewing data streams on his personal display. They're starting with your Pacific Northwest.
The same region as the original first contact.
Makes sense, Kara said. Addressed the trauma of the first visit. Is it truly that dangerous? Vex asked.
The Olympic Peninsula? Kara smiled. It's where I learned to camp as a kid.
My dad used to take me there every summer. Yeah, it rains a lot. Yeah, you can die if you're unprepared. But dangerous? Commander, it's a tourist destination. The implications of that statement hung in the air.
The place that had terrified the original contact team enough to recommend species-wide quarantine was where humans took their children for vacation. The expedition team includes xenobiologists, military analysts, and cultural observers, Vex said.
They'll spend 3 months at the first site before moving to other locations. Brazil, Sahara, Siberia,
Antarctica. They're going to Antarctica? Kara couldn't hide her surprise.
Is that problematic?
It's just. She paused, searching for words.
Antarctica is one of the harshest environments on Earth. Humans have research stations there, but it's not exactly welcoming. If they think the Pacific Northwest is bad, Antarctica is going to terrify them.
Vex's scales rippled.
Perhaps that's the point. Test the extremes to establish baseline tolerances.
They watched in silence as the first landing party descended to Earth's surface. Kara had requested live feeds, and the Academy had granted access.
She needed to see this, needed to watch her world through alien eyes.
The team landed in early autumn.
Similar conditions to the original contact. Rain fell steadily, but nothing like the hurricane that had sent the first expedition fleeing.
6 team members emerged from their lander fully suited in environmental protection gear. Unnecessary gear, Kara thought.
The atmosphere's fine. The temperature is mild.
They're treating it like a biohazard zone. Team 1 to Discovery.
The expedition leader's voice crackled through the communication system.
Surface conditions stable. Beginning environmental assessment.
Kara watched them move through the forest, scanning everything. The trees, the soil, the air itself. They approached Earth like it might explode at any moment. It would have been funny if it wasn't so sad. They're detecting movement, Vex noted, highlighting a thermal signature on his display. The expedition team froze.
Weapons drawn, they formed a defensive perimeter. The thermal signature resolved into a visible target.
A black-tailed deer grazing peacefully 30 meters away. Hostile fauna confirmed, one team member reported. Quadruped, approximately 100 kilograms.
Visible horns.
Preparing defensive measures.
Belay that,
the team leader ordered. Observe only. No aggressive action unless attacked.
The deer looked up, noticed the strange beings in their protective suits, and bounded away through the underbrush. The expedition team remained frozen for another minute before relaxing.
They think deer are hostile, Kara muttered. We literally have farms full of them.
They don't know that, Vex said. To them, any Earth creature is potentially lethal.
The first day proceeded without incident, unless you counted the team's growing exhaustion from wearing full environmental suits in 60-degree weather with 80% humidity. By evening, 3 team members were showing signs of heat stress despite the mild temperature.
"They're going to have to remove the suits," Vex observed. "The protective gear is causing more problems than Earth's environment."
"But they're afraid," Kara said softly. "Afraid the air will poison them. Afraid the water carries diseases. Afraid that everything they touch might kill them."
Day 2.
The expedition leader made the call to reduce protective measures. Suits remained, but respirators were removed, allowing direct exposure to Earth's atmosphere. The team's stress levels decreased immediately.
Air composition confirmed. Safe for all team species, the xenobiologist reported. Oxygen levels elevated but within tolerable ranges. No toxic compounds detected. Recommending continued reduction of protective protocols. They spent the next week exploring the region, cataloging flora and fauna. They discovered Douglas fir trees, marveled at their height. They found salmon in the streams, documented bear tracks, collected samples of moss and lichen. Everything was analyzed, categorized, assessed for threat level.
Most of it was harmless. Some of it was edible.
Nothing attacked them. They're beginning to relax, Vex noted during the second week.
Watch their movement patterns. Less rigid. More exploratory.
They're realizing Earth isn't actively trying to kill them, Kara said. Now they just need to meet humans.
That moment came on day 16. The expedition had established a base camp in a clearing, processing their collected data.
A sound emerged from the forest. Voices.
Human voices!
The team scrambled for weapons as 3 hikers emerged from the tree line.
2 men and a woman, wearing simple outdoor gear, carrying backpacks. They stopped when they saw the expedition camp, clearly confused.
Hello, one of the men called out. You folks with the Forestry Service or something?
This is a marked trail. You can't just set up camp here.
The expedition team stood frozen. The humans approached cautiously.
Hey, you guys okay? Need help or something? The expedition leader finally found his voice. We are conducting research.
Official research. You should maintain distance. For safety. The woman laughed.
Safety, buddy? We've been hiking this trail for 3 days. You're the ones with the fancy equipment in the middle of nowhere. We're fine. You have been in this environment for 3 days?
The xenobiologist's voice carried clear disbelief.
Yeah? Is that weird? We're doing a week-long circuit.
We'll hit Lake Crescent tomorrow, then loop back to Port Angeles. The man gestured to his companions.
We do this every year. It's beautiful out here.
Kara watched from the academy, a smile spreading across her face. The expedition had spent 16 days carefully analyzing Earth's threats, wearing protective gear, taking extreme precautions. Meanwhile, humans were casually hiking through the same environment for recreation. They're treating it like a vacation, Vex said, echoing Kara's earlier statement.
Because it is, Kara replied. That's what I've been trying to tell you. Earth isn't hostile to us.
The hikers ended up staying at the expedition camp for 2 hours, sharing information about the area. They recommended good camping spots.
Warned about areas where bears were common. Explained that the rain was actually lighter than normal for the season.
When they finally left, continuing their hike, the expedition team sat in stunned silence.
Expedition log, day 16,
the leader said into his recorder.
First contact with indigenous humans. Subjects displayed no environmental distress despite extended exposure.
They characterized this region as recreational. Request psychological assessment to determine if subjects are representative of human population baseline. Vex looked at Kara. They think those hikers might be unusual.
Just wait, Kara said. They're going to realize every human is like that. Month 2 of the expedition, the team had relocated to Brazil, to the Amazon rainforest.
If the Pacific Northwest seemed hostile, the Amazon was several orders of magnitude worse. Temperature exceeded 35 degrees Celsius.
Humidity approached 100%. The biodiversity was staggering and included species that could actually kill unprepared visitors.
The expedition team lasted 3 days before encountering an indigenous community. 40 humans living in the forest, subsisting on fishing, hunting, and agriculture. They'd been there for generations, raising families, building homes, existing in an environment the expedition classified as Class Omega+. They have children here, the cultural observer reported, voice filled with disbelief.
Human juveniles playing in the Amazon rainforest without protective equipment.
The indigenous leader, a woman named Maria, welcomed the expedition with generous hospitality. She showed them how to identify safe water sources,
Taught them which plants were edible and which were poisonous.
demonstrated fishing techniques that had been passed down through her family for centuries. "You seem surprised," Maria said through a translator, speaking to the expedition leader.
Did you think humans only lived in your metal cities? We thought. The leader struggled for words. We thought Earth was dangerous.
Maria laughed, a warm sound that echoed through the forest.
Earth is life. Yes, you can die here if you're foolish.
But you can live here if you're wise. My grandmother lived here.
Her grandmother lived here. We are part of this place, just as the trees and rivers are part of it.
Kara watched from the academy as the expedition team processed this information. They'd expected to find humans huddled in protective shelters, struggling against their environment. Instead, they found communities thriving in conditions that would kill most galactic species within hours.
Month 4. The Sahara Desert. Temperature exceeded 50 degrees Celsius. Water was scarce. The landscape looked like something from a dead world.
And yet, the expedition encountered nomadic tribes who had lived there for thousands of years. People who navigated by stars, who found water in places the expedition's sensors couldn't detect, who wore simple robes instead of environmental suits and survived.
Month 6. Siberia.
Temperature reached minus 40 degrees Celsius. The expedition required heated shelters and full environmental protection. They found a Russian research station staffed by 12 humans who'd been there for 8 months, conducting climate research. The humans wore heavy coats but no protective breathing equipment.
They complained the winter was mild compared to previous years. Month 8. Antarctica. The expedition almost refused to land. Temperature reached minus 60 degrees Celsius. Wind speeds exceeded 100 kilometers per hour. This was beyond hostile. This was categorically unsurvivable.
They found McMurdo Station. 150 humans living and working in conditions that would freeze most galactic species solid in minutes.
The humans had buildings, laboratories, recreational facilities. They had a coffee shop.
Someone had brought a guitar and hosted weekly concerts. "This is impossible," the expedition leader said, standing in McMurdo's main facility, watching humans in casual clothing move about their daily routines.
No species should be able to function in these conditions. Dr. Kerr.
Patricia Hayes, the station commander, smiled at him. "It's actually pretty comfortable once you get used to it."
Last year we hosted a marathon, 26 miles across the ice.
43 people participated. Everyone finished.
The expedition team returned to orbit after 9 months of study, having visited 17 locations across Earth. They'd encountered humans in deserts, rainforests, mountains, tundra, and frozen wastelands.
They'd seen children playing in conditions classified as lethal. They'd met elderly humans who'd lived their entire lives in environments deemed unsurvivable. The report they submitted to the Galactic Council was 6,000 pages long. Kara received a summary copy transmitted to the Academy.
Commander Vex found her reading it in the observation deck, her expression unreadable.
"What does it say?"
he asked. Kara looked up, and Vex saw tears in her eyes. But she was smiling.
"They recommended lifting the quarantine," she said quietly. "Full integration.
Immediate action.
They said humanity represents the greatest untapped resource in galactic history." And the Council's response? Emergency session scheduled in 2 weeks. Kara stood, moving to the window overlooking the stars.
"Vex! They're actually going to do it! After 200 years, they're going to let humanity out!"
Are you ready for that? Kara thought about her world.
About the billions of humans who'd lived their lives unaware the galaxy existed. About the children playing in rainforests and the scientists working in Antarctica.
About her father who'd taught her to survive in the Pacific Northwest, never knowing he was training her for something bigger than camping.
I'm ready, she said.
The question is whether the galaxy is ready for us.
Vex's mandibles clicked, and what she'd learned was his version of a smile.
Lieutenant Chen, after watching that expedition's reports, I believe the galaxy needs humanity far more than it realizes. Then let's hope the Council agrees.
2 weeks. 2 weeks until the vote that would change everything.
2 weeks until humanity either joined the stars or remained isolated for another generation. Kara Chen returned to her training, pushing herself harder than ever. When the Council made their decision, whatever it was, she would be ready. Earth had taught her to survive. The Academy had taught her to fight. Now she would teach the galaxy what humanity could become. The universe was about to discover that Earth wasn't a death world. It was a forge. And it had been preparing warriors for 200 years.